am not yet back in South Florida. I did not make the trip with the team. I'm hanging out in a near Raymond James Stadium hotel room, and we are trying to unpack what happened to Florida Atlantic last night against USF. 48-13, the final. Florida Atlantic voiced the day after, presented by Robes Law Group, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. Personal injury lawyers in the community for you. Robes Law Group, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. That was a not great final, I don't know, let's call it 25 minutes of football. Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. Florida Atlantic, same thing that happened against Memphis, and there's a lot more to unpack. FAU pulls within a score, and then the bottom falls out. It happened against Memphis in the loss in Boca, and then it happened against USF last night at Raymond James. Day after, as always, I'm joined by Robbie Lastella, New Era Prep, who, like me, not yet back in South Florida. He is appearing to be on his way now. He is in his automobile. Just be safe, Robbie. I don't want you hitting other vehicles.
We're stopped here.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
All
stopped.
right.
We haven't left the hotel just yet. We're still here. This is actually Christian's car. He's still
nice.
He's still catching some Z's, but yeah, I had to hop on here with you, and yeah, happy to do it. But wish we were talking a little more positives here on this Sunday morning.
Yeah. So FAU falls to 3-4 now, 2-2 in the American. Go ahead and hit the chat. It is open for those of you watching live. Give us your impressions. Give us your questions of what you viewed, whether you were at Raymond James Stadium last night or you watched from home. For me, Robbie, and again, there's a lot to unpack here, but it just sort of tearing the scab off here. This was back to penalty-ridden, but also the timeliness of the penalties really hurting Florida Atlantic, or the mistakes really hurting Florida Atlantic. And I thought that, well, the game got away in the second half. The first half is where FAU really dug itself the hole, and I found that to be the far and away more frustrating half than what we saw in half number two.
Yeah, I think the beginning of the second half was kind of similar to the beginning of the first half. I mean, FAU had a chance there to take the lead after USF missed the field goal early in the first half. It was 7-3, and then they weren't able to. USF goes on to outscore them. I believe it was 14-3 to end the half and close it 21-6 going into the half. And then to start the second half, come out hot. You score that touchdown. Not only do you do that, you stop USF twice on back-to-back possessions, not field goals, punts. You don't capitalize on either of those, and then you do force them into a field goal, but you're still not able to respond after that. And, USF was doing a lot defensively. Obviously, we saw the pressure. We heard from Asad Wasim after the game talking about them doing different things in coverage to limit their deep passing attempts, limit the explosive side of the offense. And, I think obviously the penalties on all three sides of the ball, including special teams, limited their ability to kind of fight back, I guess. But, USF kind of clipped their wings, the Owls' wings a little bit. I mean, this was the first game all season where Cade Veltkamp did not complete a pass that traveled 20 yards in the air. Had a Messer pass that went 20 yards after the catch. But USF was not allowing anything over the top. And we saw that, it was evident on that first drive. Veltkamp went 9 of 9 for 39 yards. And they were just trying to do the short game. And USF was giving up a little bit, but they were bending and not breaking. And ultimately, FAU's offense didn't have enough juice to kind of match what USF was putting up there. And it got out of hand there at the end.
So Therese Reed, you mentioned what he said after the game is that the USF was. I'm not sorry, Therese Reed, Asad Wasim. said after the game that there were a lot of things that USF was doing in coverage. The reason they could do all of that in coverage, and I hearken back to what Zach Kitley has been preaching week after week after week, and he said it multiple times this week, including on the Coaches Show Thursday at Duffy's off St. Andrews in Boca. He said, we've got to find a way to run the ball. Last week, he had 147 against UAB. He said that was better, but he wasn't willing to sit there and celebrate it. And the reason USF is able to be creative in coverage and shut down the likes of Assad Wasim, give Jay-Sean Platt problems, be in Dom Henry's face, bracket Easton Messer, is because FAU provided absolutely no threat whatsoever in the run game. And Zach Kitley, when he talked with us on the Florida Atlantic Sports Network after the contest, said it is the worst running performance I've ever been a part of in my entire career. Think about that. I mean, he flat out said that it was the worst rushing performance he's ever been a part of in his entire coaching career. I mean, look at this, Robbie. In the first quarter, FAU -5 on the ground. In the second quarter, FAU 1 rushing yard. In the third quarter, FAU -9. Finally, in the fourth quarter, FAU able to pick up 36 yards on the ground, but that was largely because it had gotten into garbage time, and you're sort of picking apart backups and third stringers at that point. I mean, offensively, you can say what you want about being unable to throw the ball vertically down the field, hearkening back to the first couple of games of this season. But it all is predicated on the fact that the running game wasn't there, and it's not just the running backs. It's not just Jamari Sands being banged up. It's not just Xavier Terrell not being available. It's not just the inexperience of Caden Shields-Dutton. The offensive line, I mean, I think it's probably safe to declare that was its worst performance collectively of the season. And if not the worst, then it's knocking on the door of being the worst. The offensive line objectively struggled all night long against USF. And keep in mind, Robbie, this was a USF pass defense that came into last night 122nd in the country. They were 10th in the American in sacks per game. Had 11 sacks on the year, did USF. They had 5 last night. Almost hit half their season total last night, getting to Caden Veltkamp. And they weren't blitzing a lot with that Todd Orlando defense. This was just the offensive line getting bullied, getting beat up, and sometimes it's just as simple as that. This was a rough performance for the front 5.
Yeah, you going back to what you said about Kitley saying that's the worst rushing performances he's been a part of. We've now, I mean, it's not ideal. We've had 2 scenarios now here in the first couple weeks of this season that, offensive disasters that have never happened in Kitley's career, which he has stated has not happened in his career. The 6 interception game against Maryland and now this. So that's obviously not ideal. That you can't have bumps in the road will happen, but I mean, you can call it what it is. Last night's run game was a disaster. At one point, it was 235-0 in late in that game in terms of net yards. There was just nothing, literally nothing going on the ground. And yeah, and I mean, in pass rush, it was 17 total pressures for USF. The offensive line for FAU, it was just, there's been some solid games as of late, but this game was not one of those. Both tackles gave up 4 pressures. Daughtry Richardson and Scarlett Jean gave up 4, so left guard. But nevertheless, it's just I see there's a reason why they weren't able to stretch the field, but at the same time, it's not like it was every down. So there was a lot that went into their inability to stretch the field, like you mentioned, and the line struggling both in pass blocking and run blocking hurt the offense as a whole. And the thing with the run game, though, is there's not much rest for the weary here. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
reinforcements coming. Xavier Terrell might be coming back soon, hopefully. But Jabari Sands looks like he's still nursing an ankle. Caden Shield Dutton, has looked good in spurts, but still a younger back. And then outside of that, you got Ethan Irvin, who's a freshman. And after that, it gets real slim. So they got to find a way to make it work with what they've got. And I just don't know, can they do that against Navy's going to be a tough team. They got a good front, but it's tough. Are they going to be able to execute this run game with the guys they have against top teams in the conference? We'll see. We'll see. But if not, they got to find a way to spark the offense in other ways. I will give credit, only one interception. It was a tip pass. They did a better job.
Yeah, not really Velcamp's fault there.
They did a better job at keeping the ball protected. But that was kind of the offense being a little more conservative than we've seen in past weeks.
Yeah, it's just last week against UAB, Velkamp was just able to sit back there and pick them apart. And this week, and again, there wasn't a lot of blitzing. It was just the front line of USF, and then the linebackers to an extent getting through the offensive line, getting through the protection. It was a step backwards, especially, Robbie, this is the same UAB defense that yesterday, even before Brendan Lewis got hurt, the starting quarterback for Memphis, UAB was getting after him. It was a UAB defense that looked extremely dangerous, and FAU handled it like it was nothing last week. So it's just, it was a step backwards. USF is a superior team. There's no doubt about that. But again, that pass defense has been objectively poor this year for USF, and they were made to look like prime Baltimore Ravens, like early 2000s from that perspective. I mentioned that the first half was the more frustrating half. FAU did not lose the game in the first half at all, as we saw coming out of the locker room. But Florida Atlantic certainly made its life a whole lot more difficult in the first half with some really big missed opportunities or some absolute gifts delivered to USF. The first bang your head against the wall scenario, FAU put USF into 2 third and long situations on the Bulls' opening drive. 3rd and 10 with USF at its own 16-yard line. What happens? You don't contain Byron Brown. He easily slips out of the minimal pressure that came his way. First down run. Drive continues when you had a chance to get him off 3 and out. 3 plays later, 3rd and 9. What does Brown do? Able to hit Keyshawn Singleton on a button route on the far side, a hook route, and he picks up a first down. And then sure enough, Byron Brown does the rest. It's another pass, but then runs right up the middle for a touchdown. That's going to happen. It's Byron Brown. Then on FAU's opening possession, this is more what I'm talking about here. So FAU is able to get all the way to the USF 39 after a pass interference penalty, okay? Completion. It's 3rd and 2. Easton Messer catches a first down. You're at the 27 of USF. And what happens? The protection completely breaks down. Velkamp is sacked for 8 yards, and that blows up the entire possession. You have to settle for a field goal right there. So that is put your head on the table instance number 1. All right. So then USF gets the ball back. You force the first 50-yard attempt or below miss from Nico Grammatica this year. USF place kicker. So you're feeling great about yourself. Very first play of FAU's possession. The snap from Cable is a bit to the right of Velkamp. He goes to grab it with one hand, but what happens? Caden Shields Dutton runs right into that outstretched hand. The ball shoots forward, hits off of Cable, bounces backwards. FAU falls on it, but there's a loss of 8, and you have no chance after that. And that right there, that's the first quarter all alone right there if you're Florida Atlantic. And I haven't even gotten to the second quarter yet and massive special teams penalties. But, Robbie, that's the first quarter, and that was the first indication we had that this might be a bit of a sloppy evening here.
Yeah, getting behind the sticks has been an issue here at times for FAU this season. And without the ability to stretch the field, I mean, we went back to last year's offense where anything 3rd and 5 was pretty much no go.
Yeah.
And so, that really can't happen. It's tough. I mean, sacks happen. I will say that first drive, that was good coaching there by Golesh. He was getting
No doubt.
gashed left and right. Call your timeout, regroup, scheme up a sack. I mean, things like that. I mean, it just seemed like USF was playing a little bit of chess, and you can't put yourselves in bad situations, right? Too many like 3rd and 10, 3rd and 9 on that first drive. You give those up, and then, all of a sudden you're gassed a little bit, and then Byron Brown goes right up the middle for a touchdown. And so, they got to find a way to stay ahead of the chains, and you can't run the ball on first down every time. But there was success there on that first drive. A lot of screen plays. And I don't know if USF's defense shut those down too, but it just seemed like all of a sudden everything got really limited after that field goal drive there in the first half until the final drive there where they got down deep. But yeah, I mean, they really ran into a buzzsaw of opponent. USF frustrated them in ways that I don't even think Maryland did. And so, credit to USF for really, really coming out with a good game plan and executing.
USF at the start of the second quarter after Logan Lupo punts, they get to the FAU 24 after Byron Brown does his thing, a 20-yard carry. Then he hits a 22-yard pass right after. But FAU able to contain Byron Brown on a 3rd and 1, no gain on the play at the FAU 24. So 4th and 1 comes up. And what happens? Another one of those massive, horribly timed penalties. And this one, disconcerting signals penalty. FAU clapping while USF is attempting to snap the football. You just gift. I mean, you put it in a fancy box from the Boca Mall, and you hand it over and say, here's your first down. And it took USF one play to score the touchdown. After that, Byron Brown found his tight end, Jonathan Eccles. A pretty easy touchdown, all things considered. But on 4th and 1, after you had stopped Byron Brown, you had a chance to get him off the field, change momentum, and you get a disconcerting signals penalty. I mean, we saw that come to the forefront last week with the Georgia-Auburn game. And Kirby Smart, was it a timeout? Was he clapping at the official to notify them that a flag should be thrown? The entire thing. It was the talk of the SEC last week. So what happens with FAU? They come out there and in a critical situation. It's not like this was a 1st and 10 and it sets up a 1st and 5. This is a 4th and 1, and you end up moving the chains for USF. Like, that's the kind of stuff. It's just, I've got to think it happens, and Zach Kitley's got to think to himself, what are we even doing here? It's got to be so maddening. Like, that's unacceptable stuff.
Yeah, the last couple games have been better in the penalty department, but early on in the season, FAU was committing double-digit penalties left and right in these games, and I think it was 90 yards in penalties they had for that game. Yeah.
Let me double check here. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, so I mean, you can't have 90 yards in penalties and
9 for 75 for the game. Yeah.
75. Okay, yeah. So 75, but still, you can't overcome 75 yards in penalties very much either, especially when one of them is erasing a touchdown, one of them is gifting a touchdown. They're setting they're turning 4th and 1s in your offense to 4th and 6s multiple times.
Yeah.
I don't know what was going on there. Vinny has been really, really, really good all year at center, and arguably one of the best offensive linemen. But between that high snap and it just seemed like there was just some offensive line issues tonight that, it's not necessarily on Vinny per se, but it just seems like the offensive line struggled tonight for the first time in a really bad way this season. Other games, they gave them some sacks here and there, but between penalties, sacks, inability to run the ball, it's just a rough game for the big guys up front. You're missing a captain, and Akovich, he was out, and got to find a way to adjust. Okinyo King has been good up until this game, and got to find a way to get back to what you were doing. I said it on one of the USF podcasts. I thought very well that FAU could compete in this game. However, I caveated that with, if they go back to doing any of the things they did in their loss to FIU or Maryland, throw that out the window. And sure enough,
Yep.
they did some of those things that cost them against FIU and Maryland, being penalties. It's easier to say than done. It's not like Madden. It's not like you just select QB contain and the guy is locking up the quarterback. It's easier said than done. But at the end of the day, now that's 3 quarterbacks who have hurt FAU with their legs. And so other teams are going to be beginning to target that starting next week with an option offense and Blake Horvath. So got to find a way to figure out what has been causing these issues in, limiting quarterback run game as well. So there's a lot that went into that one.
So USF scores that touchdown, and credit to USF. They see that FAU is a little bit on the back foot. You had a bad penalty that led to a touchdown. And this is one of the, and I hate to admit it because it's USF, and I'm on record, and we'll get to more of it later. I can't stand South Florida, especially in this Golesh era. But this is one of the single greatest special teams plays I've ever seen. This was...
Delaware did it first.
Delaware did do it first. That's true. It was copycatted by USF, but they executed it expertly. An onside kick. I called it on the broadcast a squib kick because this was not your typical, try and chop the ball 10 yards and get a good hop, or try and dribble the ball off your toe and follow it until it hits the 45 and fall on it. This looked much more like a squib kick. It hung up in the air, headed into the direction of upbacks near the sideline, and it takes a huge hop, and USF beats Florida Atlantic special teamsmen to the ball, and they take over 1st and 10 at the FAU 30. No, at their own. At their, let's see, where did they pick that up? The FAU 35. So that's another thing, too, is that it's not like you're starting in your own territory on that quote-unquote onside kick. You're already well into FAU territory on that. It's just perfectly executed. Nobody on the FAU side was expecting it. They didn't know what really was going on. All you need is one up back to hesitate and start moving backwards and not make a confident movement towards the football to try and make a play on it, and all of a sudden it's advantage to the kicking team, and that is exactly what happened here. There was indecision. USF recovers, and here's the one thing that stuck out to me is the regular kickoff man for USF was not on the field. They brought out Chase Leon, who's their punter, to handle the kickoff. And I just wonder if that raised any red flags on the FAU sideline to see a different kicker, a different leg user, if you will, handling the kickoff for USF. We'll have to ask Zach Kitley about that. And I did not last night, and I'm not sure he would have known the answer anyways at that point. But that was not the regular kickoff man for USF. So I'm just curious in retrospect what the view from the FAU sideline would have been regardless. I mean, that's just pristine execution right there. That's phenomenal from USF.
Yeah, that special teams play right there is kind of a little bit of a glimpse to me of how far they've come in the last 2 years. I mean, 2 years ago, they were getting plays like that, got done on them. And, credit to them for being aggressive early in that game, too. They knew what FAU was going to be able to do offensively, potentially, if they were able to get going. Unfortunately, they weren't able to get going. But if they had indeed punted or kicked it off back to FAU there, who knows? FAU could have gotten something going. Maybe that would have been the drive. They got a deep shot. I don't know, but it wouldn't have been. I think what did that make it after they scored there? It was 21-3.
Yep.
All of a sudden, the game looked like it was out of hand. Like, I mean, obviously with the offense that FAU runs, they still had a shot, and they made it a ball game, but for a little bit. But yeah, giving up that there is unfortunate, and if that's the case, I actually didn't notice that it was Leon out there, but if that is the case, I mean, somebody's got to call that out. I mean, and call a timeout or something. I don't know. You don't know if you want to use a timeout there. Maybe.
Yeah,
that's fine,
that's what I'm saying. I'm just curious if.
Off.
Yeah, I didn't notice it at first either. You said you didn't notice it, and maybe, and again, I don't want to make these broad declarations or assume, but maybe it wasn't necessarily noticed on the FAU sideline because we talked about it on the game broadcast that you wonder if in that spot there were red flags thrown up when you see Chase Leon. And then you do call a timeout like you just laid out just to make sure that you're not going to get dinged with something. And so, again, maybe it doesn't matter, but that was really well executed. And you baited indecision from the FAU special teams, and that's what makes that play work is that. And Alex Golesh after the game said they had been drilling it in practice all week long. They had really had a tough time executing it. And then sure enough, FAU luck, they perfect it. I mean, it couldn't have gone any better here in the second quarter of this game. So Florida Atlantic ends up, like you said, allowing another touchdown. This one was frustrating as well because it's a 4th and goal from the FAU 1, and USF sends out a jumbo package with offensive linemen acting as H-backs, okay? And a fullback that happens to be 325-pound Cole Skinner. What happens on 4th and 1? Byron Brown hands it off to Skinner. Skinner, because he's a big, uncoordinated mass of beef, the ball goes off his chest. He can't bring it in. But what happens? The ball, it's fumbled at the goal line. It hits off of the back of a USF lineman and pops right back into the arms of Skinner, who then falls into the end zone for the touchdown. If that is not the absolute poster play of Florida Atlantic's night last night, I don't know what is. To go from giving up the onside kick to watching an offensive lineman fumble the ball at the goal line off of a teammate's back, a fellow offensive lineman's back, and fall right back into his hands for a touchdown. That sequence right there, that is the we're cursed portion of last night in the loss to USF. I mean, that is absolutely inconceivable. So then it's 21-3. FAU ends up having to punt behind the sticks again. USF with Leon doing his actual punting duties after Florida Atlantic's defense rallies and forces a 3-and-out. Messer, another great punt return, 26 yards, short field for FAU. And it looks promising again for Florida Atlantic. They convert on a 4th and 4. Michael Kirch makes a play, an 18-yard reception. But then FAU, 1st and 10, Jamari Sands, 1-yard pickup. Caden Veltkamp was looking for Assad Wasim. Caden Veltkamp, incomplete to Assad Wasim. Out comes Garrison Smith, and he misses his first field goal of the season. You're not going to fault him too much. That stuff's going to happen, but the offense just sort of sputtered in that spot. So then FAU's defense forces another 3-and-out, and it's the Easton Messer high wire act, the tiptoe touchdown punt return, absolutely beautiful, 52 yards. And what happens? Illegal blindside block, and you call it all back, and you take the touchdown off the board. I got a lot of texts, Robbie, and I know you did too, and saw a lot on social media about that being a bogus call, a nonsense call. The officials blew it. They may have. they may have. Unfortunately, it goes in the book as another extremely poorly timed penalty. That high wire rack touchdown was as beautiful as it gets, but you take it off the board, and it's sort of symptomatic of what the overlying issue with FAU has been through vast portions of the year, and especially in that first half, and that was penalties, big penalties at the worst possible moment.
Yeah, I couldn't really, being USF Stadium, they weren't going to show too many replays of that
No.
blindside block. And I watched it back. It's close. It was like but the thing is, with it being close, with the way that FAU was committing penalties in that game, with the way they have committed penalties in previous games, although the blindside block may not be what they're typically committing, refs are aware when a team is committing frequent penalties in a game, and all of a sudden they may be overanalyzing things. They're humans. Things like that happen, and whether it's a disconcerting signals call that you don't see called a ton gets called on FAU. Maybe it's a blindside block that wasn't necessarily a blindside block, could have been called, could have been not called, but they're going to call it because they see FAU has already committed 6 holding penalties in the game. I'm not saying that's what happened, but that's possible. Refs are human, and when you're committing penalties a lot, that becomes part of you. And I want to go back to that drive after it was 21-3 because they did nothing, and then that's what happened so many times. The first down, incompletion. Second down, penalty. 2nd and 15, incompletion. 3rd and 15, complete for a loss of 1 yard. Punt on 4th and 16. What is that? I don't know. USF's defense was getting after Veltkamp. We've discussed this, and it made things difficult for him. But to have your 3rd and 15 pass be a dump off, why? You're just setting up for a punt. I guess they were just setting up for a punt. But their offense was just there was just nothing going on there, and then USF was able to capitalize and ultimately take control of that game.
So after the punt return was waved off, and again, credit to Easton Messer, who is just the most versatile and just so explosive and so versatile. He's just phenomenal, and I felt badly for him that he was unable to tiptoe his way to the touchdown. But FAU then would put together either its best or second best possession of the entire game coming off of that. They shake it off, and they slowly, with 4:28 left to go in the half, down 21-3, move the ball down the field. They get benefited from some USF penalties, and FAU ends up converting on a 4th and 1 at the USF 11 with 18 seconds left. There's one of those penalties we've been talking about. Michael Kurtz is called for a false start. 4th and 6 now, but FAU converts it on a beautifully designed play to Jamari Sands. The officials reviewed it to see if there was an illegal block beforehand, but the call was upheld, and FAU ends up having a 1st and goal. But this is where the offensive line completely loses it. Veltkamp dropped for a loss of 2 on 1st down, and then on 2nd down, this was nearly the game right here. Veltkamp's flushed out of the pocket. He's got nobody downfield. The line is collapsed. He's hit as he throws, and the official doesn't blow the whistle as his arm comes forward. The ball comes free, bounces on the turf twice, and then it is scooped up by Rico Watson, who then rumbles 92 yards the other way for a touchdown. I was shocked that this actually wasn't blown dead immediately. I thought it was pretty obvious that Veltkamp's arm was coming forward, but I suppose it's easier for the official to not blow the whistle and uphold a touchdown or reverse a touchdown than the other way around. So FAU averts an issue there, and Zach Kitley at that point there's only 9 seconds on the clock, and you're down to one timeout. You don't want to risk anything. Garrison Smith comes in, bangs for the field goal. You settle for 21-6 at halftime. But all of those things that we just discussed, the penalties and getting hit on special teams and breakdowns in protection, like that's what made it such a frustrating half for FAU, because Florida Atlantic played better than being down 21-6 in that first half. And you just felt like at the time, this is not sustainable, and you've put yourself in a more difficult situation than it had to be against the 19th ranked team in the country. And I think that foretold a lot of what we saw in the second half.
Yeah, that last drive was what I was referencing earlier. That's when you had back-to-back 4th and 1s that they converted after they got turned into 4th and 6s somehow, some way. But those are situations that don't need to happen. Like, you don't
have to be
4th
there.
and 1 should
Right.
be run the ball, get the exactly. And surprisingly, when that replay of Veltkamp's potential fumble, they were showing quite a lot. And they slowed it down enough to make it look somewhat interesting. But at the end of the day, that probably correct. It shouldn't have been a fumble, and they overturned it. And that was, that gave them a little bit of juice. That FAU all of a sudden went into the locker room with momentum. I was like, I thought about it at halftime. I was like, it's not that bad. It could be a lot worse. Like, they did not capitalize a lot offensively, and then they just go down. You go in down 15. And then we'll talk about it. They score to start the second half. Momentum, that was probably the only point in the entire game. The end of the second quarter, if you want to call a field goal there, momentum. And then building on it and scoring a touchdown, a 10-0 swing there. That's huge. That's huge. You don't get that a lot against the 19th ranked team in the country. And it was just disappointing to see that it was evident they had momentum because their defense was flying around the football and forcing 2 stops. It's just unfortunate that the offense wasn't able to, rally a couple more times, potentially tie it and see what happens. But, that was the bright spot. The bright spot was the halftime surge there.
We don't have to belabor the second half because this game was decided in the first 5 minutes of the third quarter. The game became competitive and then was lost all in a 5-minute span in the third quarter. So like you said, Robbie, Florida Atlantic takes the football. That's why it was critical to get points. Now, you would have loved a touchdown, obviously, going into the locker room, but it was key to get points to head to the locker room, because then you could, at the very least, if you scored a touchdown on the opening possession of the second half, get yourself within a score. And that's exactly what happened. It was a very mature, professional drive for FAU starting the third quarter. And what I love, too, is that it featured another attempt at a wide receiver pass touchdown. Last week, it was Easton Messer. Dom Henry got the green light this time around, and the play was there, and Michael Kirch was just ripped down to the back of the end zone for a pass interference, and Florida Atlantic would score after that with the shovel pass Veltkamp to Michael Kirch, who eventually got rewarded with his touchdown. I love the Zach Kitley approach, and I think this should be a thing every single week. Someone other than the quarterback should be put in a position to throw a touchdown, whether it's a wide receiver, whether it's a running back, whether it's a tight end. I think this could be Zach Kitley's brand. Every single week, just try to find somebody other than Caden Veltkamp to throw a touchdown, because that play, like it was last week with Messer, that play was absolutely there, and Dom Henry threw a pretty damn good ball that would have found Kirch if it wasn't for the desperate PI that USF put on him. That's good stuff right there. That's really, really fun, good offense that nearly worked again.
Yeah, those are the type of plays that you practice all week and you scheme them up, and then they almost work. I don't know how much. I wonder if any of those guys in the receiver room were a high school quarterback, because that could make things interesting. You get a high school quarterback in that wide receiver, and then you can really start to play around, get a specific package going, and really try to confuse opposing defenses. But that was like one of those plays, and I'm surprised they didn't try to do a little bit more trickeration and try to get some big plays. I'm sure they were probably aware that USF probably isn't going to bite on a lot of fakes. They are a well-disciplined defense, but still, they were able to get him on that wide receiver pass. So, I'm a little bit surprised they didn't go later and try to do something else to try to stretch the field. Because when they're limiting your normal game, you got to find ways to get creative. And Kitley, as we know, is a creative coach. But, for whatever reason, that just wasn't in the cards there down late.
So Florida Atlantic gets to within a score. Kirch with great concentration, by the way. And Michael Kirch is incredible because he's someone that it was well documented against Maryland. He had 3 drops in the first half, and you're thinking, oh, boy, nerves have kicked in. He was really a non-factor for the next couple of weeks. But now, the last 3 games, he's got magnet hands. He took a huge hit on a catch in the second half of this game. Just drilled in the ribs, hung onto the football. He is such an asset, such a weapon, and he's turning into a really sure-handed tight end. He caught that shovel pass from Veldkamp with about 5 USF defenders around him, somehow secured it, and had the presence of mind to just lurch his big body forward across the goal line for the touchdown. So FAU again within 8. And then you start feeling like there's some massive hope coming because the defense bows up and they start giving Byron Brown major issues. In fact, the only sack of the night against Byron Brown came on this possession on 3rd and 4. A whole load of FAU pass rushers get into the backfield. They seal the edge. Byron Brown has nowhere to go. He's starting to run backwards, and before he can throw the ball incomplete and try and salvage some yardage, Gavage Marcelin is able to get in there and take him down by the hips. And Florida Atlantic is about to get the ball back early in the 3rd, down a score. Here we go. And then here we don't go. 1st and 10. At their own 28, sack. And you're behind the sticks. And that was the theme for a lot of the night. FAU behind the sticks, and you go 3 and out. That was the first indication of, all right, well, there's going to be more pressure put on the defense. The defense, all things considered, able to hold serve. Now, this was frustrating because FAU probably should have had an interception on this play. On the ensuing USF possession, Byron Brown is sitting back in the pocket. He throws a wobbly ball down the far sideline. Singleton's there, his reliable receiver. And keep in mind, USF did not have their best receiver, Chaz Nimrod, last night because of injury. So Singleton really fit that role. He had a good night for USF. But you've got Dylan Williams, and you've got, I believe, Terez Reed in the vicinity. And the ball just splits them.
Yeah.
Who was it? Oh, was it Reed?
I think it was either him or Duda Rogers, but one of the two.
Oh, you know what? It might have been Duda.
There was a couple.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Yeah. And they both mistimed their jump. If they track the ball properly, that's an interception. That should have not made it to Singleton. That was the first play of that possession. But again, the defense gets over it. And then they are able to defend the run and force Byron Brown into an errant throw. This time, Grammatica is good, but all things considered, yeah, you're down 2 scores again. But I'll gladly take USF having to settle for field goals, especially the way that you move down the field on the opening possession of the 3rd quarter. So FAU gets the ball back, and 2nd and 9. You have a 17-yard pass play. Caden Shields Dutton. Enter Scarlett Jean. Hold. That blows everything up because, again, you're behind the sticks. You have to punt. USF takes over. And on that next possession that started with 6:10 left to go in the 3rd quarter, Byron Brown hits a much more open deep ball for 32 yards on 3rd and 5. And then a familiar name, Wyatt Sullivan, on a masterful 4th and 1 at the FAU 24. It was a play fake that faked me out badly. On the TV broadcast, if you watch it, It faked them up badly. I thought Byron Brown had absolutely handed the ball off to Sam Franklin, who got chopped down immediately behind the line of scrimmage. Then I look up, and I don't see the ball in Byron Brown's hands, which I expected. But then I see number 8 in green rounding the right side with nobody in front of him and walking into the end zone. I mean, I totally blew the call on the Florida Atlantic Sports Network because it was just that well executed, and that's a veteran quarterback for you. But Wyatt Sullivan, who, keep in mind, 2 years ago in an FAU uniform, scored the first Florida Atlantic touchdown in that blowout win over USF. That ended up being the game right there. That is the game right there. Florida Atlantic watches Wyatt Sullivan into the end zone after getting behind the sticks on back-to-back possessions, and that was a wrap from there. That's the game. It took about 6 minutes into the third quarter for the game to be over after really fighting, really putting yourself in a position to make USF uncomfortable, and suddenly you're down 31-13. And there was just no coming back from that. You weren't going to do it. And everything just snowballed from there. The penalties continue to rack up. USF took advantage of some short fields, and it eventually resulted in the 48-13 final. And Florida Atlantic now is back to 3-4 on the season. So where do you go from here? You've got to move on, obviously, but also need to figure out how to consistently defend the run. Byron Brown leaked out a ton last night. And Chris Newbold, my broadcast partner on the Florida Atlantic Sports Network, was saying this repeatedly. With Byron Brown in particular, you can't die for his legs. And there was a lot of attempts to tackle him low in the loss last night. And he's too skilled. He's too slippery. He's too quick. He's too nimble. He's just going to step out of that. He's going to sidestep it. You had to try and hit him high. FAU just did not do that enough, didn't seal enough edges, and didn't have enough run discipline to keep him from running over the FAU defense. But I don't think Zach Kitley would disagree with this. You can't lay this on the hands of on the shoulders of the Florida Atlantic defense. The offense just did not do enough against a defense that can be had. And yes, USF came in to the night with the most takeaways in the country, but it was a pass defense that could be had. It was a pass defense that could be taken advantage of, and FAU, quite simply, did not take advantage of it. But a big reason why is that Florida Atlantic was unable to hit them in the run game. So Robbie, that third quarter where you pulled it within 8, and then you get behind the sticks on the next 3 offensive possessions because of either a sack or because of penalties, that's the game right there. It turns into 31-13, and that Wyatt Sullivan touchdown pretty much ended it with, again, a beautiful play fake. I'm professional enough, man enough, and confident enough in myself, secure enough to say I blew the call. I absolutely blew it because I had no idea that Sam Franklin, running back, didn't have the ball. I had no idea initially that Byron Brown had actually thrown the ball to Wyatt Sullivan because it was that well disguised. But that's the game right there. And that's how quickly, listen, USF against North Texas, that game was tied 21-all at halftime. USF scored 3 times in the first 3 minutes and 25 seconds of the third quarter in Denton to blow that game open. USF, not the same type of precipitous face plan, but showed just how quickly they can put points on the board if you give them just a little sliver of a chance. And FAU ended up watching USF put together what I believe was they scored the next 37 points in this game and ended up winning 48-13. So just it was the offense and the lack of ability to stay on the front foot other than that opening drive. That's killer right there. And that's why it's going to be very difficult, though, to find a team that's going to beat USF. Maybe Navy in a couple of weeks. Unless Memphis's quarterback situation next week gets significantly better. I don't see the Tigers doing it to USF, but USF offensively is so hard to keep at bay, even if you're a great defense. And FAU found that out firsthand. You got to be able to go toe-to-toe with them offensively, and Florida Atlantic just did not do enough of that last night. I refuse to say that the defense should be to blame. And yes, it's a team thing, but I'm following Zach Kitley's cues here. His offense didn't do enough, and Zach Kitley was pretty open about it after the game. His offense did not do enough to even give this team a chance late in the game.
No, they definitely not. I wouldn't say the death quarter returned.
No.
It was more. It was similar traits to that, but they what this game kind of reminded me of, and Brandon Pockris from League Winners pointed this out. It was similar to the Memphis game that once they kind of got down big, they kind of collapsed. And obviously, at what point are you surrendering a white flag there? But still, once USF really put their foot on the gas, FAU was done for, and it was the similar case against Memphis. Once they went up big there in that fourth quarter, there was nothing left in the tank for FAU, and it kind of seemed similar tonight or last night. And so, yeah, USF is a really tough team. I'm not sure who's really gonna give them, but anything can happen. I don't think anyone saw UAB going and beating Memphis this week, even with quarterback injury. So I think that's the fun thing about the American is anyone any week can kind of step up their game. But as for FAU, you're going to have a tough matchup next week with Navy. I will say it wasn't outside of the penalties. It's not like we were seeing busted coverages left and right and missed gap assignments left and right, which those are the things that are going to be a little more important against Navy. Obviously, you're going to need a run game too, because if not, Navy's going to control the time of possession. And if they do that, Navy does what they do. But, there's some positives to look at in terms of Navy next week, but there's still a lot they're going to have to clean up in a short amount of time. Got to get that run game going. Got to get that line blocking for them. And on the other side of the ball, gotta contain that QB run because Horvath is gonna give you some issues. And if you can't contain him, they'll find ways to hurt you. So
he'll throw over you too. That's the thing with Horvath is that he's as good as Bryson Daly was last year for Army, their quarterback. Horvath is in my mind, a significantly better passer, and Daly would hit you. But Horvath, he has no problem sitting back there and picking out receivers. Yeah, they're going to run an option offense, but they've got a really a lot of times you've got a quarterback who's going to be mindset run first, run the offense. No, he will gladly sit back there and pick you apart as they run triple option concepts. So it's going to be a much more difficult task to stop this option offense than it was for Rice. I wanted to play you something, Robbie, and I'm just curious. And I'm not trying to start something with USF here. But Alex Golesh after the game said something that really rubbed me the wrong way when he was asked about the disconcerting signals penalty on 4th and 1 that FAU incurred that led to touchdown in the second quarter. I'm sorry. And this was Alex Golesh after the game. This is what he said about that.
Yeah. I'm glad that they saw it, heard it. I think that one came from the sideline. It continued to come from the sideline. That's something from a coaching side that they got to get fixed. But I'm glad that you got the penalty, because it was a thing that just kept happening, and I'm glad they from the side.
Let's just hear that one more time.
That's something from a coaching side that they got to get fixed, but I'm glad that you got the penalty, because it was a thing.
That's something that coaching staff's got to get fixed. I'll say this. Alex Golesh conducts himself as if he's Nick Saban, as if right now he's actually earned something. Congratulations on the bowl eligibility after 7 games. This is the first time in the Alex Golesh tenure at USF that he hasn't used the easiest schedule in the conference to back his way into 6 wins and squeak into a bowl game. This season number 3 is the first season of the Alex Golesh era where USF has actually looked like a team that can finish in the top 4 of the league. But he conducts himself as if he's a top-tier coach in college football. And he's a really good coach. And if USF fans think they're keeping Alex Golesh into next year, especially with it looking like Billy Napier and Mike Norvell are probably out at Florida and Florida State, and there's going to be a dozen or more openings at the power school level. But Alex Golesh, mind your own damn business. Could you imagine what other coach sits there in their post-game press conference after a blowout win and decides to levy a critique against the opposing coaching staff? Who are you? I mean, you've never, in the regular season, never won more than 6 games in the regular season in your entire coaching career. Now, it's going to happen this year. But is Alex Golesh serious with that? Mind your own damn business.
He came off pompous, I will say.
Shocking.
But is he wrong? Is he?
He's not wrong, but it's also not his place.
It is. That's the. I think that's the correct thing. He should not be. Does he even know Zach Kitley? Like, they look cordial, but like outside of that, like they don't even know each other really.
Here's my theory. Here's my theory on this. He is still not over the onside kick that FAU hit on him up $1 billion in that 2023 game, and it still eats at him. I think that he's naturally arrogant. I think he's got his swagger to him. If you have a swagger to you, you're going to have some arrogance attached to that. That's his natural disposition, but I do think he's still hurt from that onside kick in 2023. Tom Herman may be gone, but I think he still has a thing against that FAU logo, and I appreciate the fact that he's competitive. But who are you? Again, Alex Golesh, they're going to compete for not only the conference championship, but for a college football playoff spot. They're that good, and I will commend him and them on that. Alex Golesh didn't recruit Byron Brown. The major component of what makes USF go is a player that was already there in the cupboard when Alex Golesh took over the program. So it's going back to 2023 after USF backs its way, stumbles its way into 6 wins and bowl eligibility, and Golesh makes the snarky comment at the first Boca Raton Bowl press conference. Oh, at least one team gets to practice in December in Boca Raton. Never mind the fact that 6 weeks earlier, Golesh, shoulders slumped, head down, onside kick hit on him, had to lumber off the field in embarrassment as Florida Atlantic celebrated on the Bull logo at midfield. He's gonna act like that as if he actually did something. Then they beat a tight end quarterback with Syracuse with half a team coming in to Boca Raton in the bowl game. Again, they have an easy schedule last year and backed their way into bowl eligibility, and then win in Hawaii. I don't think the resume, like Nick Saban wouldn't do that. Hell, Lane Kiffin wouldn't do that, and he loves to poke and prod. A guy who's never won more than 6 games in the regular season in his head coaching career, at least at this juncture, like to say something like that, get over yourself, man. You're not that guy yet.
I wish he said something that, like, I can passionately disagree with. What irks me is the fact that it is true. Like, the penalties, I mean, obviously, disconcerting signals, it's not really something that FAU is doing out here week in and week out. But the idea that FAU does need to clean up their penalties, that's not wrong. And it's just, it for him to point that out, it's just like salt in the wound after a game like that. You know, I believe in karma. The unnecessary comments like that after the game, although I'm sure it satisfied the USF beat contingent. I'm sure they got nice clicks, quotes, the whole nine. What's the point? Like you mentioned, I don't know. I'm sure Kitley will hear about that. I might even ask him what his thoughts are about that. But we'll see. We'll see.
It just, for me, it's just it is sort of a lifetime achievement award there for Alex Golesh in the way I feel about him, and especially those comments. Cause like, fine. He likes to talk. He's confident. He's arrogant. That's fine. There's a lot of people like him in college football, but I don't think he's earned the right to be sitting in a post-game press conference. And yeah, is that something that can happen on the FAU side? Sure. But we also don't need your input. Like, you've established yourself as a college football Hall of Famer. Okay.
Congratulations.
Yeah, we do not need that at all. One quick note before we wrap things up, and a reminder: Beer Garden and Boca Raton Monday Night Live, 6 o'clock here on YouTube and on X, presented by Robes Law Group, coming up tomorrow. Jim Locke, the 35-year play-by-play voice of USF, announced back on Monday, that this is his last season as the voice of USF football. He has been there from the very beginning, the humble beginnings, much more humble than Alex Golesh, beginnings of USF football, through the highs and the lows, and now back to what appears to be the highs of USF football. And I think he's still underappreciated from a USF standpoint. I don't think at times, and maybe this is just nature of the era of college football, but how important he's been to the tapestry, the framework of USF football. So to Jim, happy retirement. And even though it's USF for him personally, here's to him calling games of great significance here through the month of December and potentially into January. But what a stand-up guy, what a legend Jim Locke is. And if I can have anywhere near the college broadcasting career of Jim Locke, then I feel like I've done something well.
Yeah, Jim is great to listen to. I try to tune into all the different radio crews when I can. I think USF's got a good duo between him and Derek Sharp. I think both of them are really solid for them. And yes, like you said, hopefully congratulations on the retirement, and hopefully he gets to call some good games here down the stretch for him. We'll see. But yeah, definitely a good voice to listen to in the American radio waves, and sad to see him go, but not a lot of people get to go out on their own terms in the broadcasting world after a legendary career. So you gotta take that when you can get it.
A much better exit of the broadcast booth for him than, say, a Tom Brenneman. And if Alex Golesh gets to the playoff with USF, I'm looking forward to him critiquing Marcus Freeman and the Notre Dame sideline. Or Kalen DeBoer and the Alabama sideline. So Coach Golesh, we look forward to your critiques in the college football playoff a month and a half from now. I will say, all bashing Alex Golesh aside, I mean, I don't know how USF doesn't get to the college football playoff. If they're going to get by Memphis next week, and if they beat Navy a couple of weeks after that, Tulane's not the same level as USF. There is not going to be any, unless there is a rematch against Navy in the American Conference title game. USF is clearly the best team, and USF, in my opinion, is clearly the best team in Group of 5/6 college football. They're that good.
I agree. They're definitely very, very talented. I don't you know, when things start to get to playoff situations, anything's possible. So I'm not going to say, you know, they're going to cakewalk their way to a championship just yet. But like you said, let's see them beat Memphis next week. Let's see them beat Navy. I might change my opinion on that down the season. I think their speed mixed with physicality can match anyone, especially in a group of 5. I don't know if many teams in the group of 5 with that level of physicality and speed. So,
Ooh.
yeah, they got a good group there, and we'll see where they go.
And Byron Braun, he's a freak. He's a mutant. He's a freak of nature. That guy is a track star.
Yeah.
What an asset. What a player. And God, I can't wait for him to not be at USF any longer. Robbie, appreciate you. This is the first time that we've been able to link up for the day after with both of us outside of South Florida. So you have yourself a great trip back to South Florida, and I'll talk to you next week. Okay.
All right, Ken, take care. Safe travels back as well for you. Robbie
Lastella, New Era Preps, and joins me every single day after edition of the Florida Atlantic Voice, presented by Robes Law Group, ROBES, robeslawgroup.com. Monday Night Live, 6 o'clock, Beer Garden, Boca Raton. Myself, Damon Arnett, will give our positional awards for the USF game, and we will preview Navy, an undefeated team, as this treacherous stretch of the schedule continues for Zach Kitley and Florida Atlantic. Thanks to Robbie. Thanks to all of you for watching, and thanks to those of you who are in the podcast edition going to listen. I'm Ken LaVicka, and this has been the Florida Atlantic Voice presented by Robes Law Group. Day after. Bye-bye.